Hey guys, go ahead and get started. So my name is Kendall, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about tipping, which I think is actually a really awesome onboarding experience for crypto, and also one of the oldest uses we have for it. So in the beginning, we had Bitcoin, as I'm sure many of you know. And so Bitcoin, when it first came out, the way people would just send each other Bitcoin is they would just post their address somewhere, kind of like this on Bitcoin Talk, and send each other crypto. And so what makes it a tip versus just an exchange is kind of sending some money to somebody you don't know for something they did on the internet that you kind of like. And yeah, this actually took off and became pretty successful. And in some cases, these donations and tips could be quite large. This is one to Andreas Antonopoulos for, well, one of the tips there was $500,000, and the total was 1.3 million. So pretty substantial. So after this, just people sending each other money by exchanging addresses. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Yeah, so what was cool about this address exchange is that it's simple and non-custodial. It's just sending each other money. Basic use case of Bitcoin. It's not quite as good as this potentially de-anonymizing, but it's people choosing to do so, so it's kind of fun. Where things get interesting is when we had this cool application called ChangeTip that came out in about 2013. And so this was a Reddit tip bot that basically allowed you to mention the ChangeTip username along with on a comment that someone had created, and you could tip them $1 or a beer, which would just convert into whatever the current exchange rate was, and you would send them money. And so where this really changed the game a little bit is that you could tip users that didn't yet have an address. Why this is cool is that you could onboard people to Bitcoin that did not yet really know anything about it. They didn't have to input their address at first. You could just send it to the Reddit username, and when they were ready to, they could go in, enter their address, and withdraw their money. What was not so great about it is that it was custodial. So what you had to do to use ChangeTip is if you wanted to tip someone, you had to send money to the ChangeTip address, giving them custody of it. And then if you wanted to withdraw, you would withdraw it from the ChangeTip address. So until you did that, they had custody of it. For ChangeTip's case, this was not so bad, but as we'll see in a few minutes, it's not ideal. So here's a few more examples of what ChangeTip looks like. It was also available on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, so they tried to have a little bit of coverage there. And got a decent amount of traction, 100,000 plus users, 350,000 individual tips, and they even raised $3.5 million. I think ultimately raising money was probably where they went wrong because they weren't able to really come up with a VC sustainable type of business out of this, and eventually they went bust. Now, when they went bust, they did the right thing and they actually allowed all of the users to withdraw their money, which is about the best thing that a custodial trusted party going into business could do. So where things really get interesting is when Dogecoin enters the scene. So we have what's called Doge Tip Bot, which was very similar to this ChangeTip bot, but for Dogecoin, and they entered around 2014. So they total, these numbers are from 2014, so a bit early, $150,000 worth of tips. And remember that Dogecoin is usually worth fractions of a cent per Dogecoin, so pretty substantial given that. 60,000 users, and that was in 2014, so they ran for several more years. Probably could have been quite a bit more than this. And they really propped up the entire community. The entire Dogecoin community was tipping each other, sending each other Doge. And I mean, it really created a little ecosystem here, which is pretty awesome. Now, where things went wrong is when the creator of this Doge tip bot, well, he tried to also create a company like ChangeTip did, raised a little bit of money. Things didn't go so well. He ended up sort of dipping into the money he was custodying for his users in order to pay some of his expenses, and was just trying to essentially hold up this charade for a while. And eventually he just grew tired of it, was tired of trying to refill this little pot that he had drawn from and that he basically had a deficit on. And he said, guys, I'm done. I'm going home. I'm going to take all the money that's left in there to pay what outstanding expenses I have, and sorry. And yeah, it basically stole somewhere between $900,000 and $900,000, depending on what the price of Doge was at the time, from his users. Kind of the problem with custodial operations. And now it's dead, as I mentioned. So yeah, enter the Ether in 2017 with TipJar. It was really following the same trend. I thought I'd mention it because it's Ether and it's actually still going, one of the few that's still going. Very similar to the other Reddit tip bots. Also custodial, but if you don't shut down, if you actually continue to run the operation, it's okay. It's just that's sort of the risk. So these guys make up what I would think of as like the first class of the tip bots from around 2009, 2010 until 2017. Quite a bit of users, 200,000, not bad, especially in this ecosystem. I mean, this is a real use case with a real not insignificant number of users. It was kind of the first basic use of these currencies. You were just sending and receiving Bitcoin, Ether, and Doge. The problem is that the bots are custodial and users have been burned. This was the worst possible outcome that happened, and it did happen, so that is the risk. And then sort of the downside to the direct transfer tips so that they require prior onboarding. So you could say, hey, I really want to send you some Bitcoin, and then you have to explain to that person how they can actually receive that Bitcoin. And because it's not going to show up the second that you do it, that you then have to then tip them, it's sort of this like synchronous exchange that's not quite ideal. So where I think things start to get interesting is around 2018, enter the Lightning Network, and Tippin. So Tippin, some of you have probably seen. It's gotten a lot of hype pretty recently, and it's really cool. It's a Chrome extension that you download. It adds this little lightning bolt onto like a tweet that someone sends. You click it, and then you get like their link to basically send them a tip. It even got some attention from our man Jack Dorsey, who's been hyping up a lot of products recently. But the fact that he's excited about it is exciting. Maybe he'll add this thing to Twitter. It's pretty cool. So what does this allow? Well, cheap transactions with Lightning and the instant finality that you get. Where things are a little bit mixed, requires a Chrome extension. I put that in orange because I don't think that's an ideal user experience, but it does give this kind of native feel that's pretty cool. It requires a Lightning-enabled wallet, and I think here's where it really starts to fall off. I mean, yes, this is what you need if you want to use Lightning, but it's a lot of work to get set up with a Lightning-enabled wallet right now. I tried it myself. You either have to set up your own, use one of the existing solutions, but you kind of have to dig for them. It's not super straightforward. And where it really falls, I think, is that you have to sign up to receive tips. So it's still really cool. I'm sure that these guys will add the ability to tip someone who has not yet entered an address, but it kind of pulls away from the onboarding experience. So one of my favorite projects that recently came out is Send CryptoBot. Also started in sort of late 2018 and started to pick up steam here in 2019. They really just took on like the change tip model for Twitter, made the experience super simple. You don't need a Chrome extension. You just @send crypto @whoever you want to tip, and then the amount you want to tip. And then, as you can see here in this little GIF, you'll get a direct message. You enter your address. They'll get the same direct message. They enter their address. You get a link. You send them the money using Request Network, which gives you access to a few different ERC20 tokens. It's available on Reddit, Twitter, and also Slack. And it doesn't need a Chrome extension. It's completely non-custodial, which I love, which is very important. You can tip without having to set up any kind of account, which is really nice. And again, the same for the user, although it doesn't really give them the onboarding. And it uses XDAI. It's in beta, but it's really cool. Everyone's excited about that, and I think it's going to improve the UX. So this is where we sort of have. This is where like the state of tipping is. And I want to talk a little bit about what's next and where I think we could go and why I think this is so powerful. So the most important thing for this as an onboarding experience is that you can receive tips without having an existing account. You need some online presence that can be tipped without having you anywhere in this ecosystem, so that you can basically go in whenever it sort of fits your leisure. But most importantly, there's actually say $5 worth of a tip that's sitting there waiting for you. And that's quite a good incentive to actually get you to go in and take custody. Onboarding is really the key here. This is about onboarding people to the ecosystem. The reason that I included this image of the burner wallet is because I think it's a great onboarding experience, and it's really optimizing for the right thing, which is the minimal number of steps in order for you to receive crypto. I think the combination of sort of like the Twitter tipping with the burner wallet could be really, really powerful. And then this is where we really need to go next, is getting these users who have just received a tip to tip somebody else. Because that's demonstrating like the two most important sort of aspects here, sending and receiving crypto. And I think if we can get users to do both, then we can really, really make a difference here and get more people involved in the ecosystem and end up getting a little bit of DAI on everyone's browser. I think that's really the goal here, because once there's a little bit of DAI in people's browser, they can start using dApps, buying CryptoKitties, using the different DeFi products that are out there. And this is really, I think, going to be a big boon for the onboarding experience. And after we do that, we can go native. But not quite like this. So this is an example of a Reddit sort of beta test they're doing, where you can tip users real money on Reddit, but they're just using regular fiat currency, and they require, they do use Stripe to process it. They're going to be taking a bit of a fee there. It's not ideal. It's not the ideal experience. I think we can do a lot better. A little more like this, which is an example of Cent. I don't know if you guys have seen this really cool website where you can kind of seed/tip people for the content that they create using Ether. Much better experience. Or also one of my favorites, this is Peepeth, has native tipping now, and it works great. And most importantly, we need to make it cross-platform. So once, we don't want there to be this experience that's intrinsic to just one website. The tipping experience should be pretty seamless across the web and quite standardized. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had. I recommend you go tip someone, specifically someone that doesn't yet have any crypto, because I think it's going to be a great way to incentivize them to join the ecosystem. Thanks. Yeah, not sure if anyone has any questions, happy to.
In the case of XDAI, you showed the page. Why don't we have to have an account to receive the tip? You say the user doesn't have to have an account.
Oh, so you don't.
How does it work?
You have to create an account, but you can receive an account, or you can sort of receive the tip before you've created an account. So you could tip someone's Twitter address, and they can authenticate with Twitter to receive, and then enter an address or create one to receive it.
Okay, so the Twitter actually will be the way to authenticate? No.
Yeah, so I think, oh, sorry, yeah. Yes, so Twitter in that case would be the way to authenticate.
And to get the private key to claim the tip.
Yeah, so you would need to sign in with your Twitter account to basically say, I control this Twitter account, and then you would enter, give your public address. Or what I'm suggesting would be a better experience is then if you don't have a public address, you could just create a burner wallet, and ideally in one step, create and then fill that burner wallet. Receive the tip to that wallet.
Okay. Okay, yeah, got it.
Cool, thanks guys.